Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first live tasting of March. Well, kind of live tasting. We are tasting this live, but this is a pre-recorded segment, so we are both live and not live. It's Schrodinger's idiot podcast host. All right, that's enough bad jokes for this week. Welcome back. It's a new month, and that means I have a new co-host. Our co-host this month is our online events coordinator at Unboxed Experiences. She also works hard behind the scenes of this very podcast and hosts her own podcast called Read It With Whiskey. Please join me in welcoming Laura Juntunen.
Hello, and thank you, Brian, for that great, warm introduction. I'm really excited to be here with all of you guys. Yes, I am the online events coordinator at Unboxed Experiences. I help keep all of our virtual events running smoothly so that you guys can have some stellar events with us. And yes, it is also true. I host a podcast with the word whiskey in it. That's kind of going against the whole Brews Less Traveled theme here. But in all honesty, it's actually more of a book recommendation podcast, so we don't talk too much about whiskey. And it kind of just molds my love of books and whiskey together perfectly. But with all that being said, I really have dove into the craft beer world, the entire beer industry within the last few years. And that's why I'm just so excited to be the co-host for Brews Less Traveled this month.
You could call your podcast Book Focused, Inspired by Whiskey.
I like that, yeah.
I'm not saying change the name, but like that could be like your tagline.
For sure.
So, we just wrapped up our journey through Kansas City, Missouri, and what a lovely journey it was. But this month, we're headed north for our next city. It's a stop on the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. This gateway to the west is the 39th most populous city in the United States. It sits upon the Missouri River, and it is the birthplace of American bro culture icons 311. Yes, our featured brewery in March is none other than the Big O, Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, I'm so excited to dive into Omaha, and we've got some great little facts for you guys. So first of all, there are roughly 17 breweries in Omaha, 58 in Nebraska total. That's according to the 2020 stats from the Brewers Association.
And we'll be featuring 4 of those this month. Thunderhead Brewing Company, Infusion Brewing Company, Zipline Brewing Company, and Brickway Brewery and Distillery.
And something else interesting from Omaha, the Reuben sandwich was invented there in 1925. Who knew?
Wow. Take that, New York.
Exactly. And so were TV dinners and cake mix, but not in 1925, but in other years.
Oh. I was about to say that's a very productive 1925.
For sure.
There's also some wonderful breweries in Omaha to note. Benson, which is named for the land speculator Erastus Benson. It's home to Infusion Brewing's original location, and at one time home to actor Nick Nolte. Kind of an artsy district.
Yeah, sounds like it. Another neighborhood is Dundee. This is home to Warren Buffett. And during World War II, a Japanese fire balloon actually exploded over this neighborhood. Thankfully, no one was injured, but wow, talk about some exciting times.
That's nuts. There's also the Old Market, which was one of my favorite neighborhoods when I was in Omaha. It's a historic district, and it's home to a Thunderhead tap room as well as the Brickway Brewery and Distillery. And it's actually really cool. It still retains its brick streets from the turn of the 20th century, so it has this old world feel to it. Really cool neighborhood.
I love that. I love any type of city that has the little brick streets. It's so nostalgic and just has a really good vibe to it. Another neighborhood is Little Bohemia. This one is actually named for the Czech immigrants that found work here in the 19th century, excuse me. And Little Bohemia is now actually home of Infusion's Little Bohemia beer hall. I can't speak today.
You are right at home here, Laura. I have already infected you with what I call flubby mouth, where you
it happens.
Yeah, flub all the words. It's cool. You're going to fit right in to this podcast this month. And of course, we have to mention downtown Omaha, which is, the hub of Omaha. And it's home to the 3,000-foot long Bob Carey pedestrian bridge, which is an iconic structure of Omaha. It connects like over 200 miles of hiking trails. And also, the Zipline Tap Room is in downtown Omaha, and it's right down the street from Charles Schwab Field, Omaha, which is their baseball, which I believe hosts the College World Series every year.
Yes, it does. Very exciting.
So this is going to be a little bit different than our normal show. Laura and I are going to be tasting the Peat Smoke Porter from one of our featured breweries this month, Thunderhead Brewing Company. We're going to talk through our thoughts on the beer and using smoked malts in beer in general. We didn't have a smoked beer last month, so it's great to get into a smoked beer this month. Then we're going to be joined by the founder of our parent company, Chad Brodsky, for a unique look back on where Brewvana came from and where we're going.
Yes, and I'm really excited to talk to Chad later on. This is going to be a really fun interview, but I think we should probably get into this beer.
Yeah, it's about time. Full disclosure, everyone at home. It is 10:50 in the morning, so this is the perks of the job of doing a beer podcast. We are going to crack open a beer here nice and early. I still have the coffee taste in my mouth.
Me too.
But I think that's going to be a nice compliment to this smoky porter we have from Thunderhead, both this evening when our awesome live stream subscribers are viewing this, and it's an awesome beer for whenever you're listening to this podcast at home, on the road. Don't take that literally. Please don't drink beer while you're driving and listening to our podcast. Save it for when you could do it safely. Oh boy, I'm all over the place. Laura.
It's
Cheers.
Because it's 10:30 in the morning, right? That's what it is. That's what it is. We'll blame the time of day. All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, and right off the bat, I know that this is going to be one of my go-to beers if I ever travel to Omaha. I am a porter and stout fan, and this is right up my alley. Oh my goodness, this is so good.
The smokiness comes through really nicely, and the finish is almost a complementary flavor to the beer. It's not overwhelming. It really plays nicely with the roasty malt character in here.
There's even a little bit of a sweetness in the aftertaste, in that finish. There's a little tiny bit, like almost like a licoricey sweetness to it at the end.
Yeah, that is a perfect way to put it. Like a licorice, almost sugary sweetness, but all of these flavors are so subtle and come together very nicely to make just a really nice smoked porter here.
And we can't forget about the appearance. This is a very dark, nearly black color, and I'm loving the head on top. It has that nice little caramely brown look to it, and the lacing is really nice on my beer today. Oh, yeah, this is just so nice.
It is a beautiful drinking beer, a beautiful looking beer, and some stats on this wonderful beer, clocking in at 7.2% ABV and has a nice hearty 55 IBUs. That's definitely playing with those kind of bitter, subtle, roasty character that's in there, and is definitely working very well with the smoke character that's in there as well. And this was actually a limited run beer from Thunderhead. Less than 500 gallons of this beer were produced for this batch. So this is what they would consider one of their smaller batch beers.
Yeah, it's exclusive, you guys. You guys are getting some beer that is very exclusive. You should be excited. I know I am. Oh, I just can't get over it. I think I'm going to drink this beer way too fast this morning. This could get interesting, Brian.
Yes, it could. 7% beers at 10:30 in the morning. Good way to start things off. Really loosen you up for the morning. Definitely balancing out the 2 cups of coffee that I've already had. But let's talk about smoked malts and how breweries get smokiness into a beer. So Laura, what's your personal experience with smoked beers? Do you normally seek them out? Have you ever brewed a smoked beer? Are you a home brewer?
So I actually just opened my first batch of home brewed beer like the other day, literally this week, and I was blown away. I really impressed myself. But I brewed a pale ale, so this is the complete opposite of a smoked beer. So I have not brewed any myself, and my experience with smoked beer is I've just gotten to the craft world a couple years ago, and at first I was all about the IPAs. Now I'm venturing into those stouts and porters, which are my preference now. But I know that smoked is something that I want to keep pursuing because I really think that the characteristics of a smoked porter or stout really reflect that whiskey note that I really like, and that's been my go-to in the past. So I think that's why I like it so much. But I don't know too much about the science behind it or the brewing process.
I knew you were going to like this beer
Mm-hmm.
because, especially because it's peat smoked malt. And for those not familiar, peat smoke is a very commonly associated flavor with specifically Scotch whiskey. And that's kind of the character that I'm getting from this is almost like a subtle Scotch finish
Mm-hmm,
that
definitely.
really plays well with the sweetness of the beer and the touch of roastiness and the bitterness. But there are a number of ways breweries can add smoke flavor, smoke aromas to beer. And the most common way is to actually add smoked malts. So they will take what is known as a base malt, a malt that has gone through the malting process. It was steeped in hot water. It was germinated. That germination was cut off by heating it and drying out the grain. They would then take a portion of that grain that is ready to use for normal everyday brewing and smoke it over a variety of woods. A local brewery here in Pittsburgh, Spoonwood, actually uses cherrywood smoked malt as well as applewood smoked malt in one of their beers. And in this case, Thunderhead, I am going to go out on a limb here and guess that they're using peat smoked malt in this beer, which is a malt that originates out of none other than Scotland. And that's a tie-in to Scotch whiskey and Scotland and peat smoked malt and woohoo!
All of that. Yes. Oh, I'm just loving this beer. I think I've got to let it warm up a little bit. See if the toasty aroma or taste changes at all with the heat, with a little bit of warming too.
Yeah, and I imagine it will. We can always this a beer tip for people at home if you want to look like your Tiny Tim holding a glass of hot chocolate, but also warm your beer up in a nice tulip glass like this. You can cup the bottom of it and hold your hands in it. I don't know how effective that is, how
I think it
fast it's
would,
going to
I
warm the
mean, it
beer up.
makes sense. That surface area heating up a little bit, it'll work.
But yeah, you also have the burden of holding your glass like this, like cupping it for an extended period of time, and that's just really awkward. So it's best to let nature do its work. This is a beer that I would recommend taking out of the fridge before drinking, letting it warm up a little bit, probably ideally around 50 degrees, then pouring it in the glass. And yeah, like Laura said, those darker flavors, those chocolate, coffee, smoke flavors will just grow and come out of the glass as that beer starts to warm up.
Yeah, they'll come alive. Definitely a
Yes.
fun experience to drink the beer slowly. A lot of people they drink beer pretty quick, especially if they're out and about. They're chugging their beer pretty quickly, but if you slow it down, it can change the whole experience, you guys. Take your time. Take your time.
Appreciate the beer. You know what
Mhm.
else is a nice experience? Talking to a good friend that helped start all of this. So we're going to get into our interview here. So as mentioned earlier, we are very excited to be joined by our special guest for the special episode. Please join me in welcoming the founder of Brewvana, the founder of City Brew Tours, our CEO, Chad Brodsky.
Hey guys, hey Laura, hey Brian. Excited to be here.
And we
We're
are
excited.
so excited to talk to you too. We have some great questions for you. We love to fill in our listeners about the man behind the scenes, and all this awesomeness that we have going on. So let's get started with Brews Less Traveled. So where did the idea for this podcast come from?
So the idea for the podcast came from, we were in the pandemic and we couldn't be touring breweries for the other business of City Brew Tours. And so how can we create a compelling offer for our guests while still channeling that City Brew Tours feeling of exploring a new city through its craft beer scene? And so the logical idea, even though it was going to be a ton of work, was to go and source beer from undiscovered beer or not as well-known beer cities, but not just the beer side of things, but really getting to know the actual city as if you were going on that tour. So getting the host to the city, talking to the visitor bureaus, and then also trying to decide who had the best beer in that city. And so that's kind of how the Brews Less Traveled Beer Club and podcast was born.
And it was definitely inspired by our holiday boxes, correct?
It was, yeah. So we did our holiday boxes during 2020 for our first year, trying to figure out a way to make some money during a pandemic and while not having in-person tour experiences. So originally it started out as a Happy Hanukkah beer box, because I'm Jewish and I knew all about Advent calendars. However, there was nothing about Hanukkah. And so, well, if there's nothing there, we're just gonna create something. And so
We'll make our own thing.
Exactly. So that's where Happy Hanukkah box came about. And again, we're all about experiences, and so needed an experience around every single night. And we also did it with the 12 beers of Christmas as well. So this had got some amazing feedback. We're providing so many people incredible gifts. So we're like, well, how can we do this, but not only wait for Christmas and Hanukkah to do it, because that's a really long time after those holidays have passed. And I think we had about 3,000 people have purchased those boxes in the first year. And so how can we give those guests something that's a unique experience, not unlike anything else out there? And then again, Brews Less Traveled Beer Club was born.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with those, and we were like, how can we continue the fun? So let's move on to the big picture. Brevana is actually part of a larger organization known as the CBT Group. The CBT in that name stands for City Brew Tours, a sister brand of Brewvana, a company you founded 14 years ago. Can you tell us about the origins of City Brew Tours and that first City Brew Tours experience?
Sure. Well, the outfit or the uniform back then was very different than it is today. So the tours started out with me wearing German lederhosen, going up and down the streets of Burlington, Vermont, which was a pedestrian street, and asking people to get into a van that I had just recently purchased from a minister in New Hampshire. It was a gold 2009 Ford E350. And it was driving churchgoers, and then it was going to drive beer goers. That was the original van. And my first tour was a guy with his wife and daughter. They were shopping in the downtown Burlington Mall. He looked pretty miserable because it looked like he's been shopping for a long time. And then I come up to him wearing German lederhosen going, "Sir, would you like to go on a brew tour?" And his eyes lit up. And he got in my van that was right down by the lake, and that was the first brew tour. It was essentially me taking him around to the different breweries, teaching him how beer was made. I was his DD, I was his mandate, and that was what the tours were. And that I wish I could be able to connect with that person and just tell him how impactful that first tour was. So if you're out there and you're if you're out there, sir, I don't even know your name anymore, which is so sad. Please reach out to me.
Definitely. I know we've mentioned that before when we've been in meetings. We want to find out who this person was. See if we can get a hold of them. I think that could be like extra credit for anybody here listening to the show. Let's find this guy. Let's find him and bring him back. Let's bring him and Chad together once again. All right, so switching gears a little bit, beer education is a continuous topic on this show, especially the Cicerone program. You passed the certified Cicerone exam quite some time ago. Can you tell us what that process was like for you?
It was a lot of studying. I went into it not thinking it was going to be like, oh, it's just this test and this was before there were so many before the Cicerone program kind of, I think it was probably like 2012 maybe. So or 2013 or 14. So it was a while ago. But the process was, it was kind of a 3-part test. You had to do a tasting portion where you actually had to determine where, if this beer had off flavors, it was safe to serve. There was a style tasting where you had to say, is it this or is it that? So is it a double or a Belgian double, or is it a dunkel? So trying to decide, given those two styles, what kind of beer is this? And then it was the written part was the other side, where it was like, I think 100 questions about just beer, how you serve it.
100?
And then and then also a demonstration where you have to be able to take apart a tap handle and put it back together. I don't know if that's still on there.
Yeah, I don't know that part's on there. I don't think I've heard of that being used, but that's really interesting. Did you feel confident in that process, or were you just like freaking out that you would fail?
Well, I happened to have a good friend at Sam Adams, and her job at Sam Adams was to prep people for the Cicerone program test. And so I feel like I had a leg up in regards to it, because I really had to, I knew exactly what was going to probably be on that test, because this was her job within Sam Adams was beer education. And so I wasn't freaking out because I knew I had like the master in my corner to be able to say, all right, you're good, Chad. You know your off flavors, you know the origins of the different beers, the BJCP guidelines. I would be afraid to take it now though, because the BJCP, the beer judging certification
program.
Yeah. So there's a lot more that was added to that since I've taken the test. Like New England IPAs were not on my certified Cicerone program. What else wasn't? Probably like triple, I can't think of any other examples, but I know they've added a lot more styles to the BJCP. So the test is probably more challenging right now because you have to know all of those styles.
For sure.
Compare.
Yeah, because the beer industry has changed so much. So you have to add in all of the new things for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure if you had your Mickey to your Rocky, so to speak, again, somebody in your corner coaching you, you'd do all right. I did not know that they had the tap handle take apart. I'm just like imagining the scene from Full Metal Jacket where they're like
the actual faucet.
Yeah.
Take apart.
That is hard. There is a lot of small parts in there. As someone that has taken apart their own faucets and then panicked when they couldn't get them back together, that is complex. Chad, can you tell our listeners what to expect in the future from Brewvana as a brand?
Yeah, so obviously the Brews Less Traveled, we're going to be continuing exploring the country's amazing craft beer scene, one beer city at a time. And for the people that are on here, Brevana also is another awesome product if you're more into the doing side of things, of actually making your beer. And we have our beer making kits with a virtual expert guide to brew beer along with you. And so that's people are sometimes afraid to make beer because it doesn't come out very good, but I'm pretty much, I can guarantee that because you have this, as Brian said before, my Mickey to your right, you actually have that person to walk you along and to be that Mickey to your Rocky on this beer making class. You can't mess up because they tell you exactly what to do each step. And so that's a really cool experience. And then people that kind of get the taste for brewing beer. I know, Brian, you're a huge you homebrew all the time, or you may have slowed down since
before
your
the child.
daughter.
Yeah. It should be noted that every brewery, every good brewer started off by making bad beer. So don't be afraid to make beer that you consider is bad. It will improve.
And so this is a really great introduction to that beer making. But then for people that want to level up that experience, we have our Master the Brew Recipe Club. So not only can you can get beer delivered to your door monthly with the Brews Less Traveled, but you can also get custom curated recipes as well delivered to your door monthly. And so you can constantly have that like new seasonal beer coming up. I know Brian, actually being an expert home brewer, and other people in the company as well. My partner Barry was a commercial brewer. We kind of leverage all that decades of experience in brewing and being in the brewing industry to create some really awesome curated recipes for the Master of the Brew Recipe Club.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know the guy that wrote some of those recipes is very handsome, very intelligent, and an excellent, just above world-class podcast host.
Has a great beard as well. So debonair.
Yes, there are many awesome recipes, all of which I cannot take credit for, both available through our live homebrew kits and our Master the Brew recipe subscription kit club. There's a better name than that.
And I should mention, when out doing my own homebrew earlier in this episode, I actually went through the process through Brevana and did the homebrew kit. So I can attest to it that it works. It turned out phenomenal. And my host of that event was AJ. So shout out to AJ. He's an incredible beer guide.
Yes.
Lori, I think you were surprised too. You were expecting, when you tasted the beer, you were like, whoa.
Exactly. I shocked myself.
I made this. And I tasted my beer when we were doing the demonstrations, because I mean, I dabbled in home brewing back a long time ago. So I couldn't believe how delicious my pale ale was. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. Do you remember, Brian, when I was floored?
Yes, I do remember that. That was back when we first started doing the kits.
Started doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, even with what I said, every good brewer starts with a couple of batches of bad beer. You'll be surprised how drinkable the beer is that you can make on your first batch. And it means something too. Like, you made it. You had a hand in creating this thing. And you nurtured this yeast to create this mystical thing that we've been creating as humans for 13,000 years. And you just took part in that. And I think everybody's thought after having their first homebrew is like, okay, I need to do this again. And how can I improve on this? And that's pretty much how craft beer got started, was a bunch of people being like, I'm pretty good at doing this homebrewing thing. Might as well go professional. So.
And by people, you actually mean women, because women were some of the first homebrewers.
Women were the stewards and shepherds of beer for thousands and thousands of years. And if it were not for those matriarchs of the Sumerian families and the Mesopotamian families shepherding those recipes and that cultural significance of beer, we would not know beer as it is nowadays.
So, Laura, thank you. On behalf of all females in this world, thank you very much.
Oh, you are very welcome. You are welcome.
All right, Laura. I hope you are happy with your representation of speaking for every woman in the world.
There's so much pressure right now. I'm feeling so much pressure, you guys.
So before we wrap up here, we like to end with a final question for everything, for every guest. But Chad, you are in the Boston, Massachusetts area, and we ask this question to all of our guests. So what is something that you wish Boston was more well known for?
Ooh, Boston's been well known for a lot of things.
It is.
So
yeah.
that is a very tough question. Can I actually go the opposite way? I wish it was known for like less things. So maybe not as so this would be an easier question to answer. Because it's like it's got the history, it's got the food scene, it's got the amazing craft beer scene, it's got the tourist destinations, it's got the international airport. I feel like it's in close proximity to, like, I want to go to snowboarding north. I can go there. I guess it's not really close to I guess it's cold. So I wish Boston was, but that would be very challenging to change Boston's entire geographical location. So if Boston was in Florida, maybe that would be pretty cool.
I wish Boston was more well known for being in Florida. It's a wonderful answer.
Love that.
So Chad, where can people find more out about us?
So Brevana.com, citybrewtours.com, unboxedexperiences.com. And then you can follow us on all of those Instagrams of City Brew Tours, Unboxed Experiences, and Brevana. And yeah, I think and then sign up for our newsletters, because we've got a lot of awesome things coming up over the next 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. We've got a lot of big things in the pipe. And so I'm very excited to share all of that with all of you guys out there.
That is wonderful. And we can't wait to experience that, Laura and I, as contributors to those, experiences and endeavors. So this was a lot of fun. Great conversation. Laura, final thoughts before we get going here. Please plug your podcast again.
Oh, I will. No, I'm just really excited to be here for the month of March and Omaha as a city. I've never been to Omaha, so this is kind of my way where I can tour the city without being there. And it's definitely on my bucket list, just knowing what is coming up in the rest of the month, you guys. It's going to be a really, really great time. And yeah, my podcast, Read It with Whiskey. Again, we don't talk too much about whiskey. It's more a book recommendation, but definitely check me out there, and I'll be here for the whole month of March.
I'm going to give you this one for free. Read It with Whiskey, inspired by whiskey, reading books. That's not a good tag. Actually, no, let's not. I will throw that one away. Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us for this special edition of Brews Less Traveled. Thank you, Laura, for co-hosting, and thanks to Chad Brodsky for joining us for our interview today. We'll be back next week with a live stream, back to traditional methods. We'll be joined by a wonderful guest. We'll have another featured brewery, and we'll have 2 awesome beers to enjoy with everybody at home. So, cheers.
Cheers.